tonight we're going to do another session of a path from anguish to liberation, okay, which is Lama Yeshe's personal story. And I really want you, oh, it's you, Marcel, with JIPD. Now I see, okay. But I want you really to join in the discussion, because that's the purpose of doing this book, because all of you can read the book, and it's very easy to read the book and get it, but it's really what we're able to take out of it into our own lives that is really important. Hello, Matthew. I didn't see you till now. I just spoke to Sammy and said, where are you? And she said she has to tell you to come. So I'm pleased to hear.
I joined, but it was under Neil P. So I went back out.
Oh, I see. Okay, terrific. So now we're going to start with a little story tonight, not one from the book, but something that really teaches us. And this story is this attitude of how we are is illustrated in a lovely story of a yogi who was training in Tibet. He had got quite far with his training. He was living up in his cave and came down once every 6 months to visit his Lama and his sponsor, who gave him a bag of tsampa, that's Tibetan porridge, twice a year. He was an interesting person because before he became a yogi, he was a bandit. He was a robber. In Tibet, men didn't have many options for professions. Either you became a monk, a government official, a trader, a farmer, a herder, or a thief. A thief was a big profession, okay? That was about the range available to the average person. He had been a very successful bandit and decided that now he wanted to get enlightened instead. So he entered into his enlightenment training with the same verve and efficiency that he had applied to being a robber. He was in the front parlor of his sponsor's house, who was a very rich merchant. In this room, there were some beautiful objects around, and at a certain point, the sponsor was called out. Then he suddenly heard the yogi, who was now sitting by himself, shouting, "I've caught the thief! I've caught the thief!" The sponsor ran into the front room. There was nobody else there, but the yogi's hand was extended towards a very expensive vase, and he had caught it with the other hand. Now, when you look at that story, that's what we have to do when we are looking at ourselves. And that's why this book and all the psychology in it going towards the spiritual is such an important book, because we have to be aware of ourselves. And it's so funny because I have that kind of experience when I'm meditating often. Like when I'm meditating, a little thought, I'm quite clear, especially at night, and I'm having a lovely meditation, and a little thought sneaks in. And I'm exactly like that robber. I say, I see you right now, okay? Because I could see the motive of that other part of me, which interrupts lots of things and lots of points in my own enlightenment. And you can all talk about this just now, because once you apply awareness to what you do to stop yourself in getting enlightened, then you start the whole process in a very, very different way. And it's a very important thing. And what I want to say is that when you look at yourself, one of the stories in Lama Yeshe's book went like this, which was very interesting. When he had been teaching about something very important, he said, the Buddha told a story that illustrates how easy it is for human beings to miss this vast richness we carry within ourselves. A beggar spent his whole life bemoaning his misery. He had no possessions and only rags for clothes, and he slept on a dung heap at night. Every day he raged at his lack and bemoaned his fate. Eventually he died without ever discovering that beneath his dung heap was a big nugget of gold. He was always rich beyond his dreams, but he didn't know it. He says we must not be like the beggar and die without discovering that everything that we need is within reach. Each and every one of us is more capable than we know, more courageous, more compassionate, and more calm than we really know. And I think that is the essence of what he's really saying. That if you look at this book, from the beginning of this book, he was really impossible. He was demanding, he was blaming, especially after he left Tibet. He did everything that every one of us does with our psychology and threw all his toys out of the cot 1,000,000 times until one day he turned around. And that turning around then makes us so content with the little that we've got, because we realize we've got the richness of that nature of mind, which is so important. And so I want to read you one quote, and then I want to just look at that book quite in depth. In the Ganavihua Sutra, it is said, the immaculate disc of the moon always is unstained and completely full, but in relation to the days of the world, it is perceived as waxing and waning. It never does wax or wane. It's just what we can see from here. Likewise, the ultimate universal ground also has always been with the Buddha essence, and this essence in terms of the universal ground has been taught by the thus gone, that's the Buddha. The fools who do not know it because of their habits see even the universal ground as having happiness and suffering and actions and emotional defilements, when its nature is pure and immaculate. Its qualities are like wishing jewels. There are neither changes nor cessations. Whoever realizes this attains liberation. Now, it's such an important point, because so many of us really, really, really don't know what we're doing. And Lama Yeshe, over all the years, taught me, because by the time I met him, of course, he was already in his enlightened stage, but he taught me never to be attached. And if you look at what he was never attached to, number one, he was never attached to the outcome of something. Now, we are all the time attached to the outcome. We want things to land up a particular way. He was never attached to whether he had a small or a large audience. Didn't make any difference to him. He was never attached to the circumstances that he found himself in, but that only happened after he went on the long retreat. Prior to that, every circumstance he found himself, he was rebelling about. He never ever thought that it was the right circumstance. He was never attached to his moods, whatever they are. He says, if I'm happy, it's okay. And if I'm sad, it's okay. Now, why can't we feel like that? He was never attached to any of the traumas that he went through. And this was his great, what could I say? The essence of what he learned when he went through into his retreat, that he could let go of his traumas. Now, I think we are so attached to our traumas, and a lot of people define themselves by their traumas. They define themselves by that identity of what they are. He never ever did. And even when his brother got murdered, and he got that, and he tells the story in the book, he got that news when he was on Holy Hour, shock news. Tupten phoned him and said, your brother's been murdered, okay, in Tibet. Now, by that time, right through his life, he fought with his brother. He'd absolutely driven him absolutely mad. There were barriers between them. And when he got that news, what was so interesting is, even though he was traumatized, he went outside on Holy Hour, and there was this vast rainbow. He just saw this rainbow in the sky. And by the time everyone at Sami Ling got the news that Akon Rinpoche had died, there was chaos right through. Everybody put their tools down, left everything. Everybody was traumatized. Everybody was in a state. And he phoned through to Sami Ling, and his first thing was, not one of you stop your work, because that's how you bring out the memory of this great man. You carry on doing what you're doing. You know, also in Tibetan culture, they don't do so much loss and bereavement work because they get over it very quickly. And the thing is, we do need to do a certain amount of loss and grief. But his most important thing was that absolutely everybody had to carry on with things. He said, you don't hang on to the trauma. You carry on doing the legacy of that person, and that's how you get over it. So he said in his book here, I've been in India for just over 2 years when my life was saved when he lost a lung by Frida Bedi, this woman's intervention and the actions of the American surgeon. I was 17 years old when he lost his lung. Many people seem to be appalled on my behalf when they comprehend the things that I lost in the course of those 3 years since he left Tibet, between leaving his brother's monastery in Tibet and nursing his scars in the tuberculosis hospital in Rajasthan. If I list what I'd lost, it makes for a daunting read. I lost my homeland, the only way of life I'd ever known. I lost hundreds of close companions. I lost my entire family. I mean, he was 15. His mother, his father, you know, his father actually got tortured every day by the Chinese when they left, because Akon Rinpoche was a tulku, so they used to go and torture his father every day and put them through terrible things because their children had escaped, okay? He lost his family, his beloved older brother, not Akon Rinpoche, I think he was older than Akon Rinpoche, actually went through the whole journey with them, and when they got to India, he died of TB. And that was a most terrible loss because he was the person that Lama Yeshe always stayed with. He lost his beloved elder brother, he lost his health, and very, very nearly his life. In fact, he nearly lost his life several times. This affected me deeply. Of course, I was bewildered, grieving, and I continued to seethe with resentment towards Akon as the ultimate author of my troubles, and then of Frida as well, Frida who actually saved him. I was also receiving a profound lesson in two of the key tenets of Buddhist teaching, impermanence and compassion. I was learning once again that nothing lasts forever. We could choose whether to regard this as a tragedy or a liberation from self-centered concerns and an opportunity to practice compassion towards ourselves and others. And he says, when we witness suffering, and even more so when we experience it for ourselves, our heart and mind can awaken to compassionate action. He says, the tough times become an opportunity to learn, to empathize, to turn towards the positive and to change. In Buddhism, he talks about how the lotus, which grows in mud, okay, has this beautiful flower, but it actually grows in mud. And he says, the mud is understood to be all those difficult or unpleasant emotions and tendencies that we like to keep hidden from the world and ourselves. Anger, resentment, jealousy, pride, our selfishness, greed, and the neurotic patterns of thinking that limit us. They're all part of the mud, which is very, very interesting. Typically, we want to get rid of this festering mulch in our hearts and minds, but actually, it's more constructive to see it as the manure for the seed of compassion. If there were no mud, Then the seed would not germinate and grow up through the waters of the lake and finally burst into flower in our conscious experience and manifest in our daily life. So rather than try to clear our minds of all negativity, which seems impossible, we can welcome the feelings that make us uncomfortable as a source of transformation. When we face them and engage with our pain and the pain of others, the seedling of compassion begins to grow. We nurture it by being mindful and by practicing patience and kindness until eventually it bursts into flower. Without the darkness, the compassion cannot awaken. And without compassion, we remain trapped in darkness. So it's really quite a thing, you know, that whatever he got used to, anything that he got used to, it just changed. And then he had to get used to it again. And I just want to say, and then I want to throw it open and we'll go through a lot of these beautiful passages, but sometimes we can look back and put the whole jigsaw puzzle together and see how each difficulty in our lives, okay, each difficulty was another missing piece in the jigsaw. It's important at the end to put it all together, especially before we die. And it's important to clear up our imprints and transform ourselves and move from the relative label of the role we are playing in this life and identify our true nature, which is called identitylessness. Such an important word in some of the very higher teaching, identitylessness. Okay, it's an amazing term because all we do in the West is crave an identity and live that identity. And this he's done completely and totally. So that jigsaw puzzle, it's such an interesting thing because if you ever with kids that are doing 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and sometimes there's masses of blue sky or ocean or something. And a lot of people, when they take all the blue, they go, I can't do it. I can't put all these pieces together. You know, at least if it's got lots of different shades, it's a bit easier. But that's what our life is like. There's a lot of monotony, but there's a lot of pain and suffering. But when you look back, or when you take the helicopter up and look at the whole thing, each of those difficulties was a piece of that puzzle. And that puzzle was coming together to make you be your true self, which doesn't have an identity. It's not a counselor, it's not a teacher, it's not a parent, it's not a wife, it's not any of these things. Those are just the transient roles. And I think this was what Lama Yeshe really had to learn in his life, because how he saw himself and how he was afterwards, as I told you last time, are very, very different. And on his 70th birthday at Samiling, you were there, Kathy, as well, I think. Eh? There were a few of you that were there. It was an amazing thing to watch what happened. Akong Rinpoche, you were there, Mart, as well. Akong Rinpoche clearly knew that he was going to die. Okay, there was no doubt. If you look at that piece of the jigsaw, he knew he was going to die and he knew he wasn't going to be there for much longer. And so what he did with his brother on his 70th birthday is he put him completely on a pedestal. He defined all his work. He took his prized possessions and he gave them to Lama Yeshe Rinpoche. They were fighting over it. He gave it back. He gave it to him. He was actually preparing his brother. And when you read the book and the history of their relationship and all the headaches and heartaches that he gave his brother in the first 37 years, then that birthday was astounding because you actually see that when you look at the jigsaw puzzle, the little parts of the jigsaw puzzle, it never fitted together. But on that night, when we were standing there, it all fitted together. And it gives us such incredible hope that no matter how we failed in anything we've done in this life, there's always the possibility of complete change. I think that's what the book's about. And Akon Rinpoche obviously had this insight about his brother from the start, so he never gave up. And the minute he met the Karmapa, the minute Lama Yeshe met the Karmapa immediately looked at him and accepted him totally, even though he was a no-goodnik. He used to run away from the Karmapa and go drinking and womanizing and all kinds of things. He had this mop of hair. Have you ever seen a picture of him, Kathy, when he was younger? He had this mop of hair. He was quite gorgeous. He had a different woman every night. I mean, you know, when people say he doesn't understand us in the West, he really does understand us, because he knows he went through everything like that. So tell me what you all think about this attachment, the things that we are attached to, the outcomes, the large and, you know, the moods we attach to, the traumas, the loss, the bereavement, and also this idea of the jigsaw puzzle. Let me just hear from a few of you what you feel about it before we go on to the next thing. And we're also going to do some meditation. Anybody want to comment or ask or say? It's nice to hear your voices. I like to hear what you think of it, you know, because it's very important what he's saying there.
I think it's very important to remind yourself that you are not defined by what you have lost, because then you're attached to your trauma. And I think it's also important to remind people of it, because it sounds so simple and obvious when I say this and when you say that, but people are not aware of it. So I think just the awareness around that will help so many people.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And more than that, you see, we're such cowards about facing the darkness in us. See, that's another question. Because, I mean, when he was first on retreat, and I'll read you a couple of passages, I mean, all he wanted to do was escape. Because the minute you sit in an isolated retreat, I mean, the dark is incredible. It starts, all your darkness comes up. And we push that darkness down by activity after activity after activity after activity. We just have 1,000 activities in our life so that the darkness doesn't come. And this is the reason why people are so miserable when they're in lockdown. Because in lockdown, I mean, I just see person after person after person who's going through darkness. And nobody really wants to go through darkness. I had a person who said to me, please, can I talk to you on the telephone? I said, well, it would be much better if you talk to me face to face, like we can see each other on Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp or whatever, but it would be much better if I can see you, then I talk to you. She says, I can't bear that. Now, what do you think of that? She says, I can't bear it. I wouldn't mind hearing your voice, but I don't want you to see my face.
I think people are like falling apart. The roots are showing. They're not getting up in the morning. They're really depressed. So they're not willing to face the world or let the people see them. So they're kind of hiding. And like, yeah, so it's a form of depression, and then like their physical appearances go.
And I think there's a very high suicide rate over this COVID time, for the simple reason that it actually brings you in touch with yourself. And before you can go to that true nature, You need to wade through the clouds and the darkness. And a lot of people truly, truly are not willing to do this. It's too scary, it's too painful. And Lama Yeshe, really, it's very interesting because those two, Akong Rinpoche and His Holiness Karmapa, never gave up on him. But even if people in your life take a long time to recognize the change in you, or sometimes don't, it only matters that we've tried hard. And he writes about the Karmapa's acceptance of him, and that the Karmapa could see something in him that he couldn't. Now, what's interesting to me, it's an unbelievable opportunity, but what's interesting to me, and we'll read some of those passages, what's interesting to me is that sometimes when I'm counseling somebody who's really in a dark stage, okay, sometimes I'm listening to that darkness, but I'm actually seeing something else. And that's what Lama Yeshe writes about in his book, that he says when all these people in retreat that go to the Westerners that go for 4 years retreat, they come in and they feel so terrible about themselves. And he says, I can relate to that, but can you sit with this? Because sometimes as I'm looking at that person's real dark, eerie stage that they're going through, okay, I'm also looking at the jigsaw puzzle. And I'm thinking to myself, this that you're going through is really a necessary, these pieces are very necessary in your life, because this is missing, that is missing, the other is missing. And if you go through this particular difficult, dark time, all these parts are going to come together. Now, this is exactly what, what Lama Yeshe, what he writes in his book, how after he'd been facing the darkness, and he faced the darkness more than anybody, because he did 3, I'm not sure if he did 2 or 3, but he definitely did 2 dark retreats, each of 49 days. That's 7 weeks in the pitch dark, okay? And he writes about it here. Now, in the pitch dark, when he did these retreats, okay, in the first one that he did it under Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, and he did it in Nepal. And this room where he did this dark retreat, not even a chink of light ever came in. And so he was absolutely in the dark, and there was no toilet. The guy who was looking after him, who was a monk, he had to lower down a bucket and a plastic bag where he actually had to empty himself and then send the bucket up. Can you imagine? I mean, at least in his second retreat, there was a bathroom he could go to, even though it was pitch dark. But I mean, in this retreat, he was told before, even by his brother and by Tulku Urgyen, that a lot of people go absolutely mad because because their minds start to concoct things, and I'll read you a little bit of that in a moment too. Their minds start to concoct things because they're in the dark and they've got nothing to grip onto, nothing whatsoever, nothing at all. And so your mind starts to make up things. But he knew that he was very stable in his meditation. So as soon as he saw visions and hallucinations, he just knew they were not real, and he brought himself back right there. And he had the most amazing experiences, because when I was sitting with him after the last retreat that he did, I was sitting with him at Holy Island. I said, "What did you learn?" And he said, during the night, or didn't know if it was night or day because it's pitch dark, the entire room lit up with moonlight light, okay? He said, and the whole room was alight. And he said, when I tried to see things in the room, because you know, the light was on, I couldn't see any of the physical things in the room. So I knew that it was an internal light that I was actually experiencing, which is totally fascinating, because after that, he said he would never, ever, ever fear anything again. Because he said he knew that the light was inside us, and that as soon as this physical body ended and went down, the light was there. If you could recognize it, re-know it, it was all there. So he had amazing experiences. Can any of you imagine sitting 7 weeks in a pitch dark room and what you've got to do? And he wanted me to do a dark retreat. He wanted me to do it for a week. And I said to him, I'll come there and I'll see what it's like. I want to go into the dark retreat. I want to see what it's like. I went into the dark retreat when I was at Sammy Ling once. But I said to him, I'm really not ready to do it. I said, I'm really not ready to do it. I didn't think at that time, I didn't think my meditation was stable enough, because a lot of people lose it completely in the dark retreat. But if you are stable in your nature of mind, then you actually are never afraid. And when you come to the bardos, you actually probably don't need the bardos anymore, because you actually go through the bardos in that dark retreat. And as a matter of fact, Namkai Norbu, who his students, because I taught his students in Reunion when I went there, he made them do a week dark retreat, all of them, because he said that was the really best way to know your mind. So does anyone want to say anything? I can also read you stuff from that, because it was really fascinating.
Yeah, Melanie, I think it's a good way to know your mind, but it's also a good way to lose your mind. So, I mean, it depends.
Yes.
It depends if it's a forced or if it's voluntary.
Yeah.
But I think the lady who didn't want to see you face to face, I think it's very similar, because seeing you face to face is absolute raw emotion. And I think people are too scared sometimes to actually fix themselves, because then they move out of their comfort zone, and a dark space is not a comfort zone.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true what you're saying. And the thing is that I just have to try and contain some of these people that are going through darkness, because I think when they know there's someone there, it makes a huge difference. And this is what Lama Yeshe says in the end of the book, because towards the end of the book, he then becomes the retreat master for these 4-year retreatants that are all attended by Westerners and everything. And those 4-year retreatants, they have a really, really, really hard time, because in the beginning, even though they've given all the practices, especially when you do the foundational practices, all the darkness just comes up. And if you can realize that none of it is solid and none of it is real, it's just what we have done with our minds that it actually comes up, then we can get through it. Some of you are looking really very serious as I'm saying this. So maybe you want to comment. Yes, Matthew?
Hi, Mel. Yeah, it's just, what you said earlier, just when you opened up about the attachment to the outcomes. And I think that's quite pertinent to where I am now. And it's almost like that attachment to the outcome is almost like an addiction. It's almost like it's a compulsion in its own. It validates the ego, and, it kind of gives it a reason to exist. And I know it's all false, and it's just, probably just the way that, that we brought up, especially here in the West. It's just what we taught and what we know. Whereas, it's actually, there's a bit of sense of peace, and, you get a bit more relief from just focusing your energy on the inputs and the things you can control, and letting go. And that's really what it is, letting go of that. And that's, what it will be.
And do you think you've achieved that a bit?
It's a daily thing you've got to do. I mean, you know, because it's just that sense of control that you almost like, I feel I need that control. And if that outcome's not going my way, you know, then then that, you know, it sort of brings up another emotion, another feeling, and then you get attached to that, and it just feels itself. Whereas as soon as you let go of the outcome, then everything else starts to settle.
I know exactly what you're saying, and it's absolutely true. And that's why this book, all of you must get the book From a Mountain in Tibet and really read it, read all the passages, because, you know, he was always concerned about the outcome. And now he couldn't care less. He allows it to unfold. But what I do want to say about that is that I really, really understand that, because I think in my life, I wanted specific things for myself, and I wanted to go a specific route. And when I really went on a spiritual path, it was so interesting, because whatever route I tried to go, it just, oh, poor Eugene got bumped off. Whatever route I tried to go, it never worked out. So it's such a fascinating thing, because, you know, I then began to realize from what I was talking about, the jigsaw puzzle, that in your nature of mind, there was another way to look at your life. You couldn't see it when things weren't working out. I couldn't see it when things weren't going the way I thought they should be. But then I learned to be obedient, that when you are in touch with that absolute state of your highest nature, that things will unfold as they need to unfold. And you don't actually need to do all that much. You might need to plug the plug in, you know. Sorry, someone on Eugene?
But that's identitylessness, like you said, Mel, because the thing is, like, we're so conditioned that you must do something to make something happen, and you must know somebody, and you must network, and you must, and then, like, so we don't ever trust enough.
No, we don't. And the thing is, only when you do can you start allowing another part of your life to go back. That's why I feel so strongly about the fact, you know, I really, really feel so strongly about the fact that we let go of that attachment. And then it's amazing, but you can't always see it in the beginning when you let it go. It's only in retrospect, you know, that you can actually see it, but it's really, really, really scary. But
I would like to do the week in the dark, but I wouldn't want to fly to Reunion and then sit in a dark room.
You wouldn't. No, but if you were...
No, but it's like Reunion, imagine.
No, honestly, if you were a student of Namkai Norbu and you were learning, he made that an absolute stipulation. I went to meet him, and then he didn't come that time. He was sick. But otherwise, he probably would have said to me, you have to go in the dark retreat. But when I went inside the dark retreat, and so I could really see what it was like by sitting in the dark retreat, I just said to myself, I'm not actually ready for this. I mean, I know some of the really great meditators went to try a dark retreat, and after 1 or 2 days, they gave up. Okay, it was too hectic, the stuff that came up. So you have to be very stable in your mind, as you say, Henry, otherwise you could lose your mind as well. And a lot of people have had that, and that's why the Lamas are very, very cautious of who. But Lama Yeshe was egging me on like nobody's business. He said, you could do it, you must do the dark retreat. But I just felt I wasn't ready. I didn't mind the darkness, but what I didn't like about the dark retreat was that there was no fresh air coming in. That's what I couldn't come to terms with. I said to him, the dark is nothing to me, but the fresh air, I said, if I knew a window could be open even behind the dark, I'd feel much better. But of course, that's just a mental state. But I'm saying to you that for me, it was the lack of fresh air that would have got to me. Because, I mean, in his retreat in Nepal, he had a little pipe into the room, bringing in air. And when the wind blew, it made this unbelievable noise. Now you can just imagine, you're in this dark room on your own for 7 weeks. You do not know if it's day or night. You do not know what is going on. And this loud noise is coming through the pipe that gives you fresh air in the room. Look, you have to be very courageous to do it. And I can see that what happens when you do it is you're not going to go into the bardos, because you go into the bardos when you're in a dark retreat. But there are other ways of also entering the bardos other than a dark retreat. So I'm going to really try that myself. But I want to say to you, I want to talk about his relationship with the Karmapa. What actually happened, the Karmapa, he says that he was with the Karmapa. It was in India. He was with the Karmapa at his monastery, but he was always running out to go and play cards, jowl, drink, get women, and all that kind of things. And he says, and he was such a bad student, the Karmapa wanted him to do his Nondra. Can you imagine doing this under this great master and everything? But then he said in his book, the Karmapa always seemed to know what I was up to. He would bellow out at the top of his voice, "Where is Jamdrak? Where is that scoundrel?" Now, can you imagine that the Karmapa still cared about him and still took care of him? And then without waiting for a response, he would send a young monk off to drag me from whichever gambling den or local cinema I was hiding out in. When he'd done this one time too many, he insisted that I do prostrations in the most sacred of all the shrine rooms. Gee, can you imagine? Where he performed the black crown ceremony, a ritual for directly transmitting the energy of enlightened wisdom. The black crown had been presented to the 5th Karmapa by the Chinese Emperor Yongle in about 1410, and was said to have been woven from the hair of 100,000 dakinis, okay? The Black Crown Shrine Room was right next to His Holiness's quarters, so there were no escapes for me, he says. I had to knuckle down, okay? But he says, despite my lack of application, so he did what the Karmapa told him, but he did it with his mind all over the place. He didn't really want to do it. He had this amazing opportunity. Now, he says in the book with such shame that he feels so awful that he did that. But he says, despite my lack of application, I continue to feel enormous admiration and respect for His Holiness the Karmapa. He was not a man who ever felt the need to explain himself in words. But I felt he was refusing to give up on me. He saw something in me that I could not. I never lost my sense that he could read my mind, which meant I was always a bit frightened of him. There was something so obviously powerful about him. I know what he's saying, because even meeting the 17th Karmapa, he was also, when you go right face to face with him, you know, the energy's incredible. There was something, it was as if he emanated a luminous energy. I also loved and trusted him completely, and he continued to accept me as I was, selfish, closed-minded, rebellious, and arrogant. He would allow me to sit cross-legged opposite him as he was making the sacred black pills for which the Karmapas are famous. The secret recipe dates back to the time of the very first Karmapa in the 12th century. The pills are given to people at the time of death and are believed to help the person's consciousness navigate the bardo, the 49 interval between death and rebirth, one day when I was sitting at his feet, I cheekily asked him for some pills. Nobody else would have been so irreverent, but I didn't know or care anything about protocol. He just laughed and amazingly considered how precious they are to be and how inappropriate a person I was to receive them. He actually gave me one large pill and 5 small ones. I've given the small ones away over the years, but I still have that large, precious pill on my shrine. Now, when you get one of those black pills from the Karmapa, you just swallow it as you're going to die. And it actually guides your whole consciousness through, you know, it gives you that tie to him and guides your consciousness through the bardos. None of you would mind that, would you? Neither would I, having one of those black pills. So he got one big one and 5 small ones, and he's still got the big one on his shrine, ready to take when he's ready to die. And he kept meeting all the hippies who came from America to join and to come to the Karmapa. And then after he'd been there for a year, he wrote to Akon asking him to help him. He wanted to go to Sammy Ling. And he said, and so Akon Rinpoche thought, that's really good. All he was doing was escaping from the Karmapa, but Akon Rinpoche didn't know. And so Akon Rinpoche wrote to the Karmapa and said, Lama Yeshe, well, it wasn't Lama Yeshe, Jamdrak wants to come to Sammy Ling. The Karmapa was furious, because he wanted him right there. And then he from that time on, Akon Rinpoche stopped communicating with him because the Karmapa obviously said, don't interfere with my plans. It's my choice to keep him here. Now, isn't that a fascinating story? Because he kept him there, and right in the end, he really, really, really decided to become a monk and to take that ordaining from the Karmapa, which is so fascinating. I mean, amazing that the Karmapa could see who he was, and when he met the Karmapa, all those years, you know, in his 17th Karmapa, he died, and then he came back as the 17th Karmapa. And when he met him in the UK, Kathy, when he met him there, when the Karmapa came over to the UK, they had the most incredible, incredible bond. But the thing that was very, very interesting about the bond of the Karmapa, I just want to see what page that was on, and then we'll do some meditation. Where was it? Sorry, there was just one thing I wanted to give you because it's such an interesting thing. Where did I put it? Oh, 244. Be 1 second. He says, on June 2017, I welcomed His Holiness the 17th Karmapa to Samizong, London, our centre in the capital city. It was his first visit to the UK. He was much more grown up, but just as gracious, relaxed, and generous with his wisdom as he had been on the day I met him in 1992. And he was always accompanied by everyone. And on a previous visit to see him in India, I was frustrated at the time alone to talk to him freely, but this time we were able to speak a little more intimately over lunch. And His Holiness told me that he felt very trapped by the restrictions of his lifestyle. He once refused the gift of a caged bird presented to him by a follower who knew how much his predecessor had loved birds, saying poignantly that he would never keep caged birds since he himself knew what it was like to live in a cage. Now that's very, very interesting because he feels very caged in by the kind of lifestyle that he's got. Because if you go and visit him, like I saw him in India, you know, there are so many guards and people protecting him around him. There are so many that he can't be free to do anything in this day and age. I mean, the Chinese will just come and take him and annihilate him, or take him back and put another Karmapa forward, or whatever the case is. So he's very caged in, which is really difficult. And he told Lama Yeshe that he'd never have a bird in a cage because he felt caged in like that, which is very interesting. So let's come to his lowest point after this, but let's just do a little meditation, everybody. So I want you to just go into your meditation posture. Your spinal column is straight, your shoulders are back, your chin is a little bit tucked in, your eyes are open a little bit, and you're just breathing in and out, and in and out. And I want you to come to this moment in your life. Perhaps just for a moment, you could let the worst thing in your life come up. The worst thing that's happened to you in this life. But as it comes up, I want you to step back, just breathing in and breathing out, and coming to this very moment in time. The past is gone. The future hasn't been made. And sitting in this meditation, I want you to see the broad spectrum of your life. How all the pieces come together. How all the negative things that you've been through are all part of the jigsaw of the whole pattern of your life. I don't want you to think. I just want you to view your life sitting back as though you were watching a movie, but not touching, not judging, not aggravated, just breathing in and out, as though you could accept the full horizon of your life, just as it is right now. No attachment, no solidity, just the movie of your life, all coming together in this moment in time. I also want you to listen to the sound inside your mind, in the quiet. I want you to hear the sound of Dharmata, which is not an external sound, it's an internal sound. While you're sitting, I want to do when you really reach the lowest point, and I also want to do his 10 commandments in relationships, because I think they are, but I want to do when you reach the bottom point, because I think we can all relate to it, and then let's talk about it. He says, was I happy when he was jolling around and doing everything? No, sometimes I was having fun, but I was increasingly tormented by my memories, my resentment, my anger. I'd been having nightmares for years, and they got worse and worse. They were always about crossing the Brahmaputra River. In the dream, I was swimming to escape the bullets as they rained into the water around me, which was full of bodies, and I would awake with my heart pounding in a state of panic. I was increasingly out of control. Most mornings I would wake up deeply ashamed of myself. I think a lot of you can relate to a feeling. I'd open my eyes and try to work out what had happened the night before. Was I alone, or was there a woman with me? If so, who was she? Had I fought with anyone last night? Who had I upset? By this point, I'd ruined my reputation among the Tibetan community. Tibetans are very conservative and ethical in how they go about their lives because of their belief in karma. People would say, whatever you do, do not end up like Jamdrak. I knew that Akon would have been kept informed of all my misdemeanors, and this only increased my fury and shame. It meant everything to me that His Holiness the Karmapa never wavered in his support. I felt he saw me not just as a scoundrel, but as someone with deep potential, albeit deeply buried. Long ago, he had recognized something in me, some kernel of goodness that I could not see. And because he kept faith with that part of me, eventually I was able to find it for myself. One night, I was so drunk that I was sick all over myself and had to be cared for by Trungpa's students. I woke up in my room in Trungpa's center in Boulder with a terrible hangover. The place was littered with empty wine and beer bottles and my discarded clothes. My head was pounding. I felt totally empty. Deep down in my heart, I felt that something big was missing. And as a consequence, my life was going nowhere. That was the moment I realized I had to change. I've talked to so many people about their rock bottom moments, and every single one of them is very different. Some of them are very dramatic. Some of them are more like a series of gradual realization. Some people come to me feeling powerless and without any direction. Others need little more than a nudge of encouragement. Whoever they are, whatever they have done or not done, I tell everyone the same thing. All change begins with the resolve to turn away from negative thoughts and action and towards the positive. It begins with the commitment to sit in stillness and face ourselves, to face the negative habits we become enslaved to, and feel remorse for the suffering this has caused, both to ourselves and to others. If we keep looking, the deep wellspring of positive potential that each of us has in abundance gradually begins to surface. We may have to repeat this process over and over again. In fact, we certainly will have to do it many times, but we can do it. You can do it. He says, on that morning in Colorado, I was ready. It was a crucial moment in a long series of many such moments. The one moment which he told you all about that morning, for those of you who were there, was when he went on a fishing trip with this wild guy, and he came back and showed his brother all the pictures of the fish that he'd killed, and his brother burst into tears. And his brother said, oh my goodness, I promised our parents I would look after you, and I've been a failure, which I think was such an important thing, because I think that his brother, his brother didn't say, you're a mess. His brother said, I have failed you, which is a big step in all our lives, you know, when you can take cognizance for yourself. But he says here, seeds that had been planted in Rumtikt, in Scotland, and in the States were finally bursting into life. nurtured by the mud that clogged my mind. My anger, fear, shame, and self-disgust were the material from which the seeds of Dharma were about to burst forth. I just had to find the humility to do nothing except allow the process to run its course without fighting it or running away. My pride had always prevented me from doing this in the past. I'd spent years dancing in its grip. I thought I'd proved myself invaluable to His Holiness the Karmapa because he did all the admin in his new monastery, when in fact he'd been invaluable to me. It was only when I drained the cup of materialism and self-obsession to its dregs that I could see clearly what remained for me. My pride finally quietened down to make way for the grace within me to flower. Quite a story. I mean, for some of you who really, see Lama Yeshe on this pedestal, which he really is now, it's such an amazing story. Stephanie Moss, come on, I want to hear your voice on all of this. What do you think?
Well, I am listening, and yeah, no, you're just looking at my picture, so I'm just quietly listening here, and yeah.
But isn't it amazing? Because every time you've met Lama Yeshe, you haven't known all this about him, have you?
No. But I do remember from when he died, so yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very interesting. So tell me what you all think. I mean, it's a difficult road. Nicola Finucci, you read the book, so tell me what you think about that. And she's not unblocking. Anyone want to say anything? You all okay? You want to hear some more? Anyone want to say? Maud?
Courageous journey.
Courageous journey. But what do you get out of it for yourself?
Well, I need more courage.
Yeah, that's true. Because the thing is, he says he always did things in full swing. He never did them in moderation, which is so interesting because he says when he decided to become a monk, most people go through the stage of becoming a monk for a year, because then after a year you can change your vows if you don't want to be a monk. He took life vows from the Karmapa. I mean, to take life vows means you can never, ever give it up. And his brother said to him, I'm warning you that if you break this vow, you're going to land up in the hell realms. So don't take it if you can't break it, if you can't keep it. But he didn't care at all. He was willing to take life vows, and he did. And he went through all the things in his retreat, and they were building outside his things. And in the retreat, he tried to run away. And he says whatever he did, he just did it he just did it with absolute courage and with everything that he did. But he also was very naughty. And you know that Jamkom Control said to him one day, they were driving along with the Karmapa when he was helping the Karmapa. His Holiness the Karmapa arrived in New York, and as usual, I was his official driver. Jamkom Control, one of his 4 heart sons, was traveling with His Holiness, and he was a high master, okay? And one day, when just the 2 of us were in the car, Jamkom Control said to me, you don't realize how well His Holiness treats you. Not even other high lamas are treated like you, but you have absolutely no gratitude. You take it all for granted. And Lama Yeshe writes, this really affected me. It touched my heart. I reflected that I was no longer young and I was just wasting my life. I made a decision. It was time to renounce my old ways. And it was after that that he went to the Karmapa and he said he wanted to take life a life monk ordinance, you know, which was absolutely amazing. But I also want to read you, Mind Confused in Its Own Prison. Anyone, talk if you want to talk, anyone.
So Mel, I just, because I'm reading the book at the moment and I love it.
Okay.
And I'm just really struck by everything that he has been through. The monks have been through that journey where 300 of them and only 13 survived. But just his whole life, his whole upbringing, and everything that he's faced in his life, that a lot of Tibetans or a lot of people all around the world, non-Westerners face. I mean, everybody faces tragedy, but their level of tragedy just seems a hell of a lot. And their whole attitude to it is just completely different. And as Westerners, we apply so much of our psychology to it, and we get down in the dumps about what happened in our childhood and this happened. And it's I shouldn't compare, and I shouldn't do that, but I just think, you know, we're very precious about our little egos. And if you look at how they handle it, it makes you think, wow, I haven't been through that much. I mean, there's people working in sweatshops in China at the moment that there is real suffering of people of all nationalities. And we tend to get stuck and think that poor me, you know. So that's what struck me.
And also what is very, very important about what you're saying is that, you see, this is why a lot of the monks have such difficulty with us, with the Westerners, because, and this is the thing in the book, that Lama Yeshe is not attached to the past. I mean, when he starts his retreat, and I'd like to read that to you, but when he starts his retreat, he immediately the nightmares of that journey come up, okay? And when he starts his retreat, the whole nightmare, I mean, what they went through for those 8 months that they were escaping from Tibet was just the most unbelievable thing. Starvation, starvation and the Chinese shooting at them and people dying out and disease, and I mean the most horrific things. I can't imagine that they boil their bags, their yak bags, to try and get a little bit of the fat off to eat, because they had these sunken eyes. They were absolutely starving. And then at one point he meets his brother. His brother went on another route, and for the most fortuitous things, not Ekon, the older brother, the other brother, they found each other in the end, and his brother had been put in a camp, and his brother had stolen a big thing of tsampa, the porridge, and so they could all eat for another day or two, you know, just have enough to eat and everything. So that was amazing. But the thing about it is that the people that come from that kind of background are not attached to holding on to trauma.
Yeah.
Now this is such a fascinating thing, because some of them have worse trauma than any of us have ever had. I mean, certainly if you read in this book, there is so much trauma, you can't believe a person could survive that. But the whole point of it is that once you get to your true nature of mind, the trauma can dissolve. But most people, I remember once counseling a woman who'd been through a hang of a lot of trauma in her life. And I said to her, after a long time of counseling, are you not getting tired of talking about it? I didn't even have a real spiritual journey at that time. But I said, are you not getting tired now of your attachment to this trauma? And she said to me, you know what? I've never forgotten these words. She said to me, it's like an orange, and I have to squeeze every drop of the juice out of the orange. And I'm still processing to squeeze all the juice out of the orange. For how long?
Yes.
If you have that Buddha nature that can actually understand a whole lot of things about the trauma. Number one, that it's not solid. Number one, that it's not you. Another thing, that whatever you feel about it, it will start dissolving in time. It'll absolutely dissolve. You see, they have that ability to, it's not detach, but to let it come up, and it came out of the essence. So you see, when we are so attached, they are not attached in any way to it. It's just something you went through in the drama of your life, which then ends and you go forth. And he says a number of times here that he never, when he went on retreat and he remembered all the trauma of the Chinese, which was so interesting, he says that, I'll tell you what he says, let me give it to you directly. He says there that he had this terrible noise of all the building and everything there. And he says all the traumas and the nightmares of what had happened to them on the journey kept coming up again and again. But then what happened was he was meditating, he was doing his prostrations, he was doing his nondra, and then he decided one day, I'm going to incorporate both Mao Zedong and Chao into my prostration practice. So those were the two leaders that kept coming up all the time for him, that were the Chinese who had attacked Tibet. And then he says, typically, we do prostrations while visualizing our father and all male sentient beings on our right hand, and our mother and all female sentient beings on our left hand. I visualized Mao Zedong and Chao standing very close to me, and I imagined that they were doing the practice with me. Now, can you imagine if you've really got an enemy, and now you're doing your prostrations and you're putting them both on that side? I did this over and over again. Then one night, I had an auspicious dream. I dreamt that I'd opened up a grocery shop in New York. So I'd gone, he'd had a clothing shop before, now he had a grocery shop. And he says, Mao and Chu were my assistants in the dream. In my dream, they bustled about with aprons on, stocking shelves and serving customers in his dream. So both of them were in that dream. And he says, after that, I had no more nightmares, and I found it much easier to turn my waking thoughts away from disturbing memories and imaginings. My mind began to settle, and I felt more at peace. And then he says, I often tell this story to my students when they come to me with feelings of despondency about their practice. It's not unusual to run into obstacles once we get beyond the initial honeymoon phase of meditation. Some people lose heart and want to give up. I advise them to persevere, to be patient, and hold faith with their practice, because even our deep-seated obstacles can hold the key to freedom. This is what I discovered with the story of Mao and Chao. I mean, very, very interesting, because he did have a lot of nightmares, but then he had 8 months of this terror. So it had to go somewhere. He'd been drinking, he'd been womanizing, he'd been doing all these kind of things. So it was bound to come up in his retreat. But what was so interesting was that he then let it go. And I remember once, I'm just trying to think who was around him, but I remember once a whole lot of us sitting around him, and we actually said to him, Lama Yeshe, somebody said to him, Lama Yeshe, are you not annoyed and angry with the Chinese that they invaded Tibet and they took away everything that you'd ever done and all the things that you'd done? And what was so interesting about it was that he said no, because he said, you know, we had karma, and Tibetans had to pay the karma back. Now, I was telling you all yesterday, people yesterday, that I'm reading the whole history of Tibet and what actually happened. And prior to Guru Rinpoche's arrival in Tibet and Trisong Detsen's arrival, they were called the barbarian nation. They were very warlike. They were warriors. They were warlike. And so they understood that the Chinese invasion of Tibet was just the return of the karma, which is so different. I mean, how many of you can look at your deep-seated difficulties and obstructions and say, well, it is the return of what I need to do? Difficult, though. All nodding your heads. Difficult. But the point is, it's from this beautiful mind. Yes, Marcel, I'm waiting for your thing. What have you got to say? No, nothing. Okay. But the difficult thing is that we make it all so tangible. I mean, when we look at our hair-raising, maybe awful childhoods or traumas or whatever, the funny thing that I always remember so clearly, I think I've told you this before, was that I had a girl in one of my groups who told the story of what happened to her. She, as a baby of 6 months, remembered her father abusing her, sexually abusing her at 6 months old as a baby. Okay, she remembered it. And then she had this dream, a bit, you know, at this age, when she was already grown up, she had this dream. She was on a boat, and it was a slave boat. And she saw this person on the boat with a whip. And she said she recognized that the person who had the whip on the boat was her in a previous life. And as she was about to whip this one slave, he turned around, and in her dream, she recognized it as her father. She recognized him as her father. She told me the dream. I didn't tell her. So it was fascinating, because she said to me, I made my peace with all his abuse. Which is quite interesting, don't you think? Scary, but interesting. I see you all nodding your head, but everybody's shocked. Yeah, she told me the story of her own life. She told it to me. So it was unbelievable. So when you look at everything that happens, it's all got its sequence, and I think it's really, really important. So I just want to end quickly with the last quote of Lama Yeshe. He says right at the end, 2:48, I'll be 1 second. I'll just take 1 more minute. If I haven't shocked you all too much tonight. He says here, I'm not a psychologist and have never aspired to be a therapist, but I absolutely believe, and this is borne out by decades of working with countless people, that positive change is possible for every one of us. It's all about working with our mind. The mind is the source of both our happiness and our confusion. And the key question is to ask ourselves, in order to move away, the key question to ask ourselves in order to move away from confusion and towards happiness is, what am I feeding? Am I feeding the negative habits or the positive tendencies? We can be digging a hole in the garden, or bathing our children at night, or doing the end of the year accounts, or chanting mantras. But whatever it is, we must ask ourselves this question. It's much better to dig a hole mindfully, taking pleasure in physical exertion and the turning of the soil, than to chant mantras in a distracted way, stewing over some past grievance. The right motivation is a habit of mind. So are awareness and compassion. If we put in the hard work, if we have the willpower and determination, we can do anything. Dharma is tried and tested and has never failed in 2,600 years since the time of the Buddha. I invite you to discover its merits and benefits for yourself and to patiently work through the obstacles that will inevitably arise on this profound path to the complete ripening of your potential as a human being. You must get the book and you must read it and you must see his great, great achievements that he made with Holy Hour, with all the things that he's actually managed to do. But the most important thing about this book is to see that question that people say, oh, well, these lamas have a wonderful life and they never understand what we go through and they don't understand what he really understood and he really went down that road. He was fascinated by a lot of Western things. And that's the important thing, that he turned it all around and came out in his nature of mind. And now I know when I phone him and I ask him, how are you? And I know he's desperately ill. You know what his answer is always to me? As long as your mind is fine, it makes no difference. Such an answer. I mean, he's nearly died. I don't know how many times, we've been doing mantras when he's really been close to death. And he pulls through. But when you ask him, how are you? Is everything all right? He goes, as long as your mind is all right, everything is all right. I really want you to ponder that, because the way we go about our lives is not like that at all. And I think it's really important to do that. And I'll stay for a few minutes to talk, but let's just dedicate to all sentient beings. Those who want to ask can still ask questions. We won't do the English, we'll just do Sonam. We dedicate to all sentient beings who are really deeply going through a terrible time. We dedicate all our prayers and all our lecture and all our talks and sharing to their being able to relieve themselves and free themselves. Sonam diye tamche zipane tope nepe tranam tamshele jegana chibana sipe sole dua duwarsho. So it's fascinating, I think.